This is Dr. Wysong. This series of videos on the big questions of life will show where each one of us is led if we dare to leave behind preconceived ideas and see where reason and evidence lead.
The Laws of Thermodynamics. Don't let this title scare you. The takeaway from this chapter, which is things can't come from nothing and things get messy, is so simple every child knows it. Evolution means that physical reality holds within itself the capability to cause the origin of itself and the universe. Moreover, matter, energy, and natural laws serve as the only needed raw materials for the appearance of the universe and life, and its transformation into increasingly complex organisms. The first law of thermodynamics. Evolutionists ignore the problem of the origin of their starting materials. They're taken as freebies. It really reminds me of a joke. And it goes something like this. An evolutionist was explaining to school children that the origin of the universe was no big deal. And a student remarked, well, then how would you do it? And the evolutionist said, sure thing. First you start with some dust, and the student interrupts. Hold on, get your own dust. Natural laws, energy, and matter must be accounted for, but there's nothing within them that can account for their own origin. Moreover, the first law of thermodynamics, also known as the law of conservation of energy, states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Energy can be thought of as matter, or mass, since Einstein showed the two to be equivalent in the famous equation E equals mc squared. This means matter, mass, can be energy and vice versa. If energy cannot be created, the universe, including us, made of energy, which is the same thing as matter, should not exist, but it does. Thus, the evolutionary tenet that the universe appeared spontaneously from nothing violates the first law of thermodynamics, a known truth. Ideas that contradict truth are false. The second law of thermodynamics. Even if we allow evolution to have starting materials and laws for a big bang, nothing's solved. In fact, things get even worse. That's because evolution is a progression from simple to complex. First, natural laws had to emerge from nothing. Then energy from nothing. Then atoms, perpetually moving and energized dynamos, had to appear. A Big Bang explosion had to form. Everything else, using unaccounted for pre-existing natural laws, thermal noise, or energy, and hydrogen gas, or matter. Then simple atoms had to combine to form cells and then humans. The most apparent question is, hearkening to our common sense, how can these transformations be true when they contradict what we observe and experience in everyday life? We don't see, and keep in mind that science is observation after all, we don't see natural laws, energy, or atoms coming into existence from nothing, and then further organizing. Rather, things rust, decay, break, fall apart, get all disorganized and messy. Functionally complex things turn into dust. Dust doesn't turn into increasingly functionally complex things. Science backs up our common sense and experience. The second law of thermodynamics demands that things proceed to maximum disorder. According to this law, the entire universe is headed one way with time's arrow, toward a bleak, dark, cold, uniform equilibrium of randomness. The reverence that working scientists have for the second law is typified by the famed Sir Arthur Eddington, and I quote, and he's speaking here of the second law, is the supreme metaphysical law of the entire universe. If your theory is found to be against the second law of thermodynamics, I can give you no hope There's nothing for it but to collapse in deepest humiliation." End quote. It is the second law that prevents perpetual motion machines. No matter how efficient a machine is made, it eventually wears down, degrades, and disassembles. Leonardo da Vinci, in 1494, wrote, and I quote, "O ye seekers after perpetual motion, how many vain chimeras have you pursued? Go and take your place with the alchemists." End quote. Now then, if great minds over the course of centuries can't defy nature's second law, unattended nature most certainly wouldn't either. But defying the second law is exactly what the alchemy of evolution means. Against the backdrop of a universe that's headed inexorably toward absolute chaos, evolutionists contend that atoms, energy, and then biology do cartwheels uphill over every other spontaneous material thing headed thermodynamically downhill. The existence of the tremendous functional complexity of life in the context of a universe that's infected with a thermodynamic virus causing universal degradation and uselessness presents a conundrum. Since evolution means simple to complex, the very material science evolution hails, including the second law, is the very science that denies the possibility of evolution. Another problem is presented in that evolution demands an infinitely old universe. But the second law says that if the universe is infinitely old, the order that we see in it, planets, galaxies, hot spots, stars, and us, would have long since breathed its last gasp and now be absolutely cold and without order. Everything should be just a homogeneous mix of energy and elementary particles evenly distributed throughout the universe. But that's clearly not the case. The inference from the second law is that since all things run down, they all must be wound up to start. A sufficient winder-upper can't be matter or energy since that's the stuff for which we're trying to account. And besides, the second law governs matter and says it cannot wind up all on its own, but must instead wind down. Therefore, the fundamental evolutionary tenet that things spontaneously increase in order and complexity violates the second law of thermodynamics, a known truth. Ideas that contradict truth are false. On the other hand, a creative intelligence, not bound by the laws of thermodynamics, is a sufficient explanation for the incredible functional complexity of the universe and life. This conclusion doesn't require any religious predisposition, nor does it foster one. We're simply letting known truths speak to us. Any evolutionist who disagrees is free to prove by evidence or experiment that complex things on the scale of complexity found even in the simplest living organism can arise spontaneously. So far, in spite of millions of pages of scientific literature and hundreds of years, nada, nothing, just proclamations about how true evolution is. But that's religious faith, not science. This material has taken 3/4 of a century of life experience and decades of research, thought, and writing. Hearing that it has helped is really the only reward I seek. Feel free to contact me with your thoughts or questions at asIfThinkingMatters.com.